Hello everybody. Next up is a pair of number 19 Stanley block planes. Let's take a look at them. The number 19 block planes are an excellent user. They've got a depth and lateral adjustment. That lateral is a nice thing to have. You can look at both sides. And there's a look at their bottoms. They look pretty good. The 19 is identical to the 18 in every way except for the length. Book value of a 19 is $45 to $75 for the common 19. The older types are worth considerably more. And one of these is a Sweetheart airplane, which probably puts it around the mid-20s. And the one on the right is a newer one. So let's break them down. All present and accounted for, sir! Yep, that's all the part. There's a good look at everything. The underside of these caps doesn't look too bad. Time to scrub the bottoms with some simple green and my little scrub brush. So after scrubbing both bases in a deep sink, I can see that the Japanning on them is probably really close to 99%. So steel wool, sandpaper on a stick, and wire brushes. That's what I used on these parts right here. So I ran the 150 paper around the edges, cleaned them up good. If and when you do that, make sure that you don't round the edges over. You want to keep them nice and sharp like they were from the factory. Next thing I want to do is take these little finger indents right here on my wire wheel and clean them out. And there's a look at it after it's been cleaned up on the wire wheel. You can see the machine marks are going from top to bottom, so that's the way you hit it with the wire wheel. On this other one, the machine marks are not as visible, and it's got a little bit of rust on it still, so I'm going to use my sandpaper on a stick, working up and down just like the original machining was, and clean those up a little bit. Next step, I'm going to lap the sides and the bottom. When you lap them, you always want to have the mouthpieces put back in. So I do my lapping on 4 sheets 150 grit paper end to end. And I opted to lap these planes because number 19s aren't worth a whole lot of money. They're going to make good users. They could be a collector's piece, but a lot of them don't like them touched like this. So if you're a collector that doesn't like them lapped, then somebody's going to get some beautiful users. And another reason for lapping them is so I can show you how easy it is to hide a hairline crack. One of these two has a hairline crack in it, so you should be looking for it. But you can't see it. It's right there. If you get the light just right, you might be able to see it. Now you can blend that in even more, and you want to do this if it's your own plane. You can't sell something like this and hide it. You got to be honest and admit that it's there. But the next step on the cracked one is I'm going to use the 3000 grit and I'm going to swirl, and we'll see what happens. And by swirl, what I meant was I use that 3000 grit in a circular motion. I don't go straight with the grain of the original machining marks. And there's what it looks like after it's been swirled. So if you do get a hairline crack in one of yours, and you want to continue to use it without being embarrassed when one of your buddies comes over, this is how you can make it look better, and they'll probably never see it. Next, I want to use my magic pens to touch up some of the missing Japanning spots. If you look around the edges, like right there, top of the cheek, a little bit towards the front here and there, just some small little bits of Japanning that's missing that I can color back black again. You can see where I use the magic pens. It's the bright spots. Anywhere I had bare metal showing, I went over it, and I'll go back over those spots maybe 3-4 times, but it has to dry all the way in between. So I lightly hit the underside of the caps with my sandblaster, followed that up with those wire brushes and some 3/0 steel wool. So the underside is basically done. Second coat on the bases of that touch-up. And next thing I'm going to do is do the top side of the caps with the sanding sponge and some 3000 grit paper. So both of these caps had some good looking nickels, so the sanding sponge and the 3000 grit on the rubber sanding block really smooth it up nice, kind of polish it, get it ready for me to take it over and buff it. So on to the buffer. I think it's safe to say that that's about as close as it gets to seeing magic in my workshop. Both caps came out beautiful. And I got a third coat on the Japanning touch-up. That'll probably be the last one. I will buff that up with some 3/0 steel wool after it dries and see how it looks. So it's on to the irons. I run the outside edge of my irons over 150 grit paper on my lapping station. And I get the rounded edge using my rubber sanding block, 150 grit paper. Pretty easy to do. Just make sure you don't round the corners. And the edges, after doing that, look pretty good. I'm going to go over to my wire wheel to do the recesses where the depth adjustment hooks into the iron. And after that's done, I take a roll of 150, like a half sheet of paper, in the notch and clean up the inside of the notch with that roll. And with that done, I'm going to hit the fronts and the backs of the irons. First thing, I'm going to use my rubber sanding block with 150 grit. If I'm not happy with that, I'll take it over onto my lapping station over here. We'll give it a shot and see how it turns out. So after 2 or 3 minutes with 150, I'm pretty happy with the way both these irons look. They didn't have any pitting, just some minor surface rust. So I'm going to hit them next with the 3000 just to lightly buff them up. So there's a look at the finished irons and the tools that I used to do them with. And over here the bases are done with the Japanning touch-up. I used the 3/0 steel wool and kind of buffed the new Japanning to blend it in. Of course the caps are done. So next thing I'm going to do is give all those 4 parts right there and the bottom plates a good coating with my dirty oil. The oil I use, my dirty oil rag, is a secret, so don't ask me what it is, but there's my dirty oil rag. With the dirty oil worked into every nook and cranny, it's time to move on and sharpen the irons. First thing I do is I lap the back side of the irons. 150 grit on my sharpening paper. Work it back and forth, keep an even pressure. Check it every once in a while to see what you're doing. So the idea is I want all of this part to be perfectly flat. So I did a little bit more lapping on it. It's easy to tell when you've achieved perfection because the leading edge will be completely smooth and you won't see any of these old marks in there. So that's about another 30 seconds worth. And as you can see, there are no more scratches running that way. So at the 150, that's good enough. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the second iron. So with the process repeated on the second iron, you can see that it's been smoothed out. You also notice that the sanding marks were running lengthways, now I've gone sideways. If you're concerned with that, what you can do is finish it in circles, and that pretty much removes lines from any one direction, and you end up with the back side looking like that. And that's what I like to do. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. And it doesn't take a lot. Of course, I'm going to go to finer grits after I work on the cutting edge. I use the General number 800 sharpening, plain iron sharpener and chisels for doing my irons. 150 grit cuts pretty fast. It's difficult sometimes with the eyeball to see if that edge is all the way out there where it's supposed to be. An easy quick test is it should stick to my fingernail, and it doesn't. It's just sliding right over it. So there's still a microscopic part of this that does not have the edge on it yet. So I'm going to continue until I get it there. Alright, we'll test it again. Now it's grabbing. Next is going to be 1000 grit, followed by 3000, 5000, and 7000 grit paper. Same as what I did on the 150, except no need check on the fingernail. It's about 40 strokes each on these papers. I think the most critical grit for checking is on the 1000. I'm going to flip it over, I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to see if I can see any of the heavier grit lines in it. It should be like mirror smooth with some super fine 1000 grit lines. That's what I got, so I'm ready to move on to the 3, 5, and 7. So I finished the 3 and the 5, and now I'm winding it up with the 7. On all those papers, the 3, the 5, and the 7, I like to finish it by doing a little left-right. Seems to remove the burr, but you're still going to have to get rid of it. Checked for a mirror-like finish, which that's what I see. And now we go back to doing the back side. For the back side of the iron, I'm going to repeat the 1000, 3000, 5000 grit paper. I use the swirl, check it for polish, and I usually finish the edge with a couple of back and forth strokes like this. Keeping that iron flat on the paper the whole time. I'm going to repeat that process for the 3, 5, and 7. So with both irons sharpened to a razor edge, it's time to move on to the small parts. And just like magic again, they're all cleaned up looking really good. Next step is to wipe off all the dirty oil and get it ready to put back together. That means a coat of wax goes on too. And one last look at all the parts before we put it back together. Wax has been applied, wiped off, and we're ready to go. You know, watching these old planes go back together is almost as good as being there for the birth of your child. Ah, who am I kidding? There's no comparison. These are some beautiful planes, aren't they? There's the back side. A look from the right side. And a look at the irons and those nice tight throats. And if you remember, this is the one that's cracked right here. Jumps right out at you. Time for a test drive. First up is the older Sweetheart number 19. It's going to cut its teeth on a 3/4 inch piece of pine. I think its teeth are sharp. Yep, rolling the shavings right up out of the throat. The number 19s, they make great users. This is just one more of them. And this iron will cut. And next up is the newest of the 219s. No complaints here. I might be able to add to my wood wig with this one. Tell you, there's be nothing like a wood wig to motivate you guys to get up out of those chairs and get busy on the honey-do list. Yep, and just like the Sweetheart number 19 before it, this plane will cut. So the test drive of these two beautiful number 19s is done, and they pass with flying colors. I hope some of the tips I provided were useful for you on your restoration projects. And these two number 19s will go on eBay the first week of June most likely. And also the first week of June is my drawing for the free Stanley number 3. So if you haven't watched that video and entered, made your comment so you can win, then go do that because it's getting close. Well, time for supper. Bye.